We're dealing with processes which start on Friday afternoon. And the question is, can we set something off on Friday afternoon, like dyeing or soaking or drying, and let it carry on through the whole of Shabbat? In other words, clearly we are going to stop working on Shabbat, but do the things that in our domain have to stop working too? Do our utensils have to stop working too? That's the question which we dealt with yesterday, and we found that Beit Shammai seems to be strict in the sense that Beit Shammai require our stuff to stop working. Whereas Beit Hillel will say, no, it's okay for the humans to stop working, but stuff that belongs to us like ink or dyeing or food which is soaking or stuff which is drying or traps which are set for wild animals, all these processes, or a time clock on a electrical system, all these processes which we set going before Shabbat can carry on running through Shabbat. And of course, the halacha follows Beit Hillel. And we are going to pick up today in Mishnah 7, where we're talking about processes, not so much that involve things, but processes that involve people, but people who are not Jewish. So Beit Shammai says, "Ein mochlin lochri, ve'ein toanimon, ve'ein mabihim alav, ela kadesh yagia lemakom karov." We don't sell something to a non-Jew. We don't help him to load up a donkey. We don't load him up with an object unless he can get to a near place. And that effectively means get to his destination. Unless he can get, unless he can reach a near place. But the meaning is to reach a near place before Shabbat. And then, as we've seen through all of these preceding Mishnayot, Beit Hillel matirin, and Beit Hillel permits it. You can give something over to a non-Jew, and as long as it's in his possession, it's up to the non-Jew to decide what he does with it. We're not responsible after we hand it over, just as we're not responsible after we set off the electrical time clock or the traps for the animals, or we set the dyes to soak or whatever. And the Mishnah then continues it sort of gets closer and closer, if you like, to our causation. And it talks about work which we're giving to a non-Jew to do for ourselves. So what if we're not just loading him up, but we're employing him to do work, to do our work? And the Mishnah is going to continue, Beit Shammai Omrim, Ein not nim orot l'abdan, velo chelim l'choves nochri. We're not going to give hides to a tanner. This refers to a non-Jewish tanner. Velo chelim l'choves nochri, and we're not going to give clothing to a non-Jewish launderer. And here we explicitly say it's a koves nochri, a non-Jewish laundry person. Unless they can deal with it while it is still day. So we can't employ someone to carry out melacha, to carry out work on Shabbat. And again, we've seen this pattern right through. We began 6 Mishnayot ago with a dispute between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai are standing with swords and spears outside the Beit Midrash to stop Beit Hillel coming in and voting. And the halachas, there are halachot decided that day according to Beit Shammai. But the Mishnah then brings this string of halachot, which are all decided according to Beit Hillel, almost as to reinforce the rules as to how the halacha is decided. And so in all these cases, uvechulan, in all these cases, Beit Hillel matirin im hashamesh. Beit Hillel permits as long as the sun is shining. In other words, as if to say, look, you can drive your car over to a non-Jewish garage and you can ask him to fix it without specifying when he's going to fix it. And as long as the sun is still shining on Friday afternoon, it's fine. You can drop your car off to the garage. You don't have to worry about what he's going to do. But, and there's always a but, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel comes in with an example. Now, who is this character? Well, actually, there were two Shimons and there were two Gamliels. There was a Gamliel in the time of Herod, and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel was his son. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel's son was then called Gamliel. The generation goes Gamliel, Shimon. They're calling their children after their fathers. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel might have been this might refer to the elder who's living in the time of the temple, or it might refer to the son of Rabban Gamliel of Yavne. So the temple is destroyed. The son of this Rabban Shimon goes to Yavne. That's Rabban Gamliel of Yavne, who is thrown out after his dispute with Rabbi Hoshua. And his son is Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who's after Yavne, who's a basically 2nd century sage. He's the father of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So we don't know which one of these we're talking about. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, Nehagim hayu beit Abba, my father's house was accustomed. And at this point, I wonder whether we're not talking about Rabban Gamliel of Yavne, because Rabban Gamliel of Yavne was very strict and particular. Nohagim hayu beit Abba, it was the custom in the house of my father. Shehayu notnim klei lavan lechoves nochrish lo shayamim kodem laShabbat, that we would give white clothing to a non-Jewish launderer 3 days before Shabbat. So that's 3 whole days. In other words, clearly following Beit Shammai, right? Rabban Gamliel here is clearly following Beit Shammai, even though we know the halacha follows Beit Hillel. So he's machmirim, and the Gemara in the Talmud in Yerushalmi comes back and comments that if it was colored clothing, which was easier to wash, then they might hand that out on Friday afternoon, on Friday. But white clothing is difficult to wash, particularly in those times, right? Because they don't have the technology that we have nowadays. So for white clothing, the house of Rabban Gamliel would hand it out 3 days before Shabbat. Maybe this is actually the Rabban Gamliel the elder, because I think by the time we get to the second Rabban Gamliel, I think the consensus has probably shifted to Beit Hillel. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is going to object, but we are going to end this little sequence of Mishnayot, this sequence of tension between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai with agreement, because they both agree. They both agree. Veshavin elu ve'elu. They both agree. She tuanim korot Beit Habad, that we can lay down the beams of the olive press, ve igulei hagat, and the circles of the wine press. These are the sort of it's a big circular sort of, it's not a beam, it's a massive heavy disc. It's not a millstone, it's a massive heavy wooden disc which you'd shove into your wine press. Your wine press is round and you've got this massive wooden disc on you. So you put the grapes into the wine press. You've got this massive wooden lid and you put that on top and then you crush that down. And that's going to crush the juice out. So they both agree that the beams on top of the olive press or this disc on top of the wine press can be laid down on Friday. And again, from the commentators in Yerushalmi, it seems as if what they're saying is, look, most of the juice in terms of the grapes and in terms of the olives comes out in the first couple of hours, first probably minutes actually. So we let them drip. We might let them drip for 24 hours or 48 hours, but the vast majority of the juice comes out almost immediately. And that's why we're okay to do, they both agree, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel both agree that we can do this on Erev Shabbat, because most of the work is carried out on Erev Shabbat before Shabbat comes in. So we end, if you like, with a moment of harmony, and we'll explore different issues as to what processes we can begin or not begin on Erev Shabbat in the realm of cooking when we look at the last couple of Mishnayot in this chapter tomorrow. And those Mishnayot, by the way, will deal with processes which are half complete or nearly complete on Erev Shabbat. So this idea of how complete the process is, and for that matter, the agreement of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai will play itself out at the end of the chapter.